There are many focal lengths a filmmaker explores throughout their journey, but there's one that seems to be more contentious than the others. Some say a 35mm full-frame equivalent looks natural, and some say it looks awkward. Could it be both? Please welcome the Zeiss Milvus 35mm f1.4. Placed right between 28 and 50mm, this beloved focal length is considered by many to closely resemble natural human eyesight. Whether you agree will be determined by how much of your peripheral vision you consider to encapsulate your perception. There are movies completely shot on just a 35mm lens, and not just for the convenience factor. As someone that has solely used this focal length for 2 years, I can recommend this as the ideal prime if you can only have one lens. In a time where visuals take precedence over dialogue, the appetite for wider perspectives grows in tandem with that for larger sensors. Perhaps we image makers feel a broader field of view will fit more cinematic elements within the frame. 35 nearly follows the Goldilocks principle, making it versatile for capturing any scene. But like a Swiss Army knife, there will certainly be other tools that can do the task better. Critics often say 35mm is not wide enough for establishing shots, while not tight enough to have compelling compression. 28mm is typically the more popular choice for landscapes and contextual backgrounds. Similar to anamorphics, wides typically have a clear purpose, as if to flaunt, look at this is cinematic. But I believe there is enough of a difference in distortion and compression between 28 and 35mm to distinguish their utility. 35 is noticeably tighter, providing more focus on the subject, yet still lacking the compression of a 50. As a result, this lens falls into limbo of not having the scope nor focus to feel particularly deliberate. But this is exactly why I find it compelling. This focal length never begs for attention, framing the scene in an unremarkable manner. It conducts more of a humble brag, almost documentary in presentation. At risk for ambiguous direction, framing requires more consideration than usual to convey engaging narrative work. Filming too far away makes your subject feel devoid of intent. Too close, and you have an uncompelling close-up. You might also have more difficulty finding those cinematic angles with such an unimpressive focal length. I believe this lens excels for dialogue between two characters. We don't want one overshadowing another, as long as you can limit the negative space. Depending on your aspect ratio, I think this intuitively makes sense for a realistic drama. But it could also make expansive sets look more authentic, enhancing the character of a scene, whereas an anamorphic lens would dictate it. And that immersion is what I seek in filmmaking. Although you can achieve this look with any brand, I am partial to the rendering from Zeiss. This lens is superbly built like any other Milvus with a few distinctions. When focusing by hand, you will have to extend 225 degrees for a full focus throw, which really dances on the cusp of frustration. The focusing ring is incomprehensibly integrated with the entire barrel of the lens, making it a nuisance to handle without also rotating focus. However, it does improve upon its specs by being lighter than an Otis as well as having closer minimum focus. It even has weatherproofing, quieting the fear of losing your expensive investment to rain or sand. Compared with the 15mm ultra-wide, the 35 pristinely reproduces your scene while also possessing the same 3D pop of the Otis. I would say the rendering is really only distinguishable in color reproduction. The 35 Milvus is a few hundred Kelvin colder and has slightly less contrast than the 28 Otis. After corrections, I consider differences between the two to be marginal, perhaps only identifiable at f1.4 or on a crop sensor where you may notice vaguely richer dimensionality and saturation from the premium option. The compression can make the bokeh excessively blurry compared to a creamier texture from the Otis. Should you find it overpowering, f2.8 and above will still look lovely. Some describe modern Zeiss as sharp and clinical, but I find this characterization lacking depth. The dramatic focus fall-off allows for a gentler three-dimensional sharpness, but does lose some razzle-dazzle from the 28. The texture is not as impressionistic, with a more abrupt transition with out-of-focus areas. But in return, you have a sharper rendering which also produces fantastic photos. Combined with strong resolving power, these optics evoke a sense of clarity, as refreshing as a cold glass of water. But the question remains, whether it will be your drink of choice among today's artificially sweetened options. If you've been trying to quench your thirst with the best alternative to an Otis in the Milvus lineup, I can attest that the 35 is an inconsequential compromise. I will certainly use both of these, but if you already have an Otis, this lens will be an unnecessary luxury. As filmmakers evolve their cinematography skills, the desire to seek louder image-making tools is inevitable. But I'd argue, if you truly had masterful control over the frame, you wouldn't need to overcompensate. Character for me has never been a priority for my lenses, because for me, filmmaking has always been about finding the location, finding the light, finding the angles. At what lengths are you willing to go to capture the story? If you want more character, DaVinci Resolve 19 and its new color slicing tools provide all the expression you need through color grading. Or you can just join my Discord to download some of the free looks and soundtracks I create for my videos. I'd even argue that optics like these force you to improve, because if it doesn't look beautiful with unpolluted eyes, you'll have to reevaluate why. These clean optics prioritize clarity over character, and won't allow you to buy your way into creating cinematic visuals, making your bad scenes look clearly bad instead. For those yearning to replicate that cinematic magic, perhaps the character you've been looking for all this time isn't missing from your lens, but is missing from your scene. Boring doesn't have to be a bad thing. Be like water, not the glass. Flashy focal lengths and character don't have to be a requirement for cinematic images. After trimming the fat, you might just find you can picture your vision a little bit more clearly.